problem, and so does the entire Michigan media. As always, this is the James Dixon Podcast. I am your host, James David Dixon, and we are here for a good time, not a long time. So let's jump right into it. These are the three truths of Michigan politics for April 2026. It turns out that the Southern Poverty Law Center and the supposed hate crimes it reports on are all fake and gay, and Jocelyn Benson's fingerprints are all over this. We learned this week in an indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice that from 2014 to 2023, the Southern Poverty Law Center allegedly paid groups like the Ku Klux Klan to commit the very same acts of extremism that groups like Southern Poverty Law Center rail against. You guys remember Charlottesville? We all saw it, right? So August 2017, Trump is several months into office. We have this massive rally in Charlottesville. We have men carrying tiki torches. In retrospect, and even at the time, it gave every evidence of being a theater kid production. Well, it turns out it was. The Southern Poverty Law Center funded Unite the Right, which put on the group. So when I say who paid for the tiki torches that day, this doesn't just have Jocelyn Benson's fingerprints on it. She damn near wrote the checks herself. And she certainly was in a role to supervise the people who wrote the checks, because from 2014, the same year where this whole thing starts, to 2019, when she became Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson was a board member at the Southern Poverty Law Center. This leaves her with two choices, none are good. One, she can say, I didn't know a thing. I did not know we were funding groups to create the extremism that we would then rail against, that we would then rally law enforcement and the media to root out. Or two, she can say, I was there and I was down for it the entire time. I was in for a penny and I'm in for a pound. Of course, saying the second one wouldn't just end her political career, it would put her closer to prison than anything else. But we do deserve an explanation from Jocelyn Benson, and what fascinates me right now is watching my colleagues in the Michigan media go out of their way to avoid asking for one. It's been said you either coach it or you allow it to happen. If Jocelyn Benson missed this, she's bad at her job and unworthy of a promotion to governor. If Jocelyn Benson took part in it, then that means it was in her political interest to stoke racial division that she would then capitalize on. I mean, I hate to be that guy, but let's remember a woman actually died in Charlottesville at the theater production that was put on by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, why did this all happen? It happened because for Democrats like Jocelyn Benson, who portrays herself as a grandchild of the civil rights movement, the demand for racism in America far outpaces the actual supply of it. I mean, think about, growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s. There's pretty much no racism to speak of. When I was a kid, my parents had my sister and I watch Eyes on the Prize, these documentaries about the civil rights movement and all the bloody fights that went into integration and making an America where truly everyone was viewed as equal under the law. That didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't easy because people fought this kind of thing tooth and nail. But nobody's cracking heads on the Edmund Pettus Bridge anymore in Selma, like happened on Bloody Sunday in 1965. But Benson still goes to Selma every single year. She views herself as a descendant of the times. John Lewis, the man who got his head cracked on the bridge, liked to talk about getting into good trouble. Good trouble is what happened that day. See, the way he viewed it, getting your head cracked was worth it if it drew attention to the lengths people were willing to go to defend a racist system in America. And so the bad news for Jocelyn Benson, much like Tony Soprano, she came in at the end. She came in at the end after the good old days, after the heydays when there was real civil rights issues to litigate. Right now, there are none. In the late 90s, when Benson started at the Southern Poverty Law Center as an intern right out of Wellesley College, there were none. In 2008, America elected its first black president. At least allegedly he's black. I think he's closer to whatever a Hussein is. But for the people who view themselves as freedom fighters against racism, it must be a drag to get here, to get to your professional career, and there's no actual racism to fight. But if these ties between Benson and the Southern Poverty Law Center are surprising to you, as someone who's well informed enough to listen to this podcast, that means you still read too much mainstream news in Michigan. Both the Detroit News and the Free Press ran AP stories on the Southern Poverty Law Center's criminal charges. Neither one of those stories made the connection to Jocelyn Benson, which is odd, because when Benson was a law school dean, when Benson was running for Secretary of State, when she was announcing her run for governor, those ties to the Southern Poverty Law Center were always mentioned. They were always touted, and it was always treated as a positive thing. Only now, with their name essentially being mud, at least until they're cleared, and maybe it'll never be fully cleared and never be fully what it was again, only now do they want to hide and minimize those things. So I often will call the Detroit News in particular, but also the Free Press office for the Michigan Democrat Party than they are neutral sources of truth. If you guys wanted to disprove these allegations, a good way would be to make these obvious connections that anyone with an internet hookup could see. Southern Poverty Law Center is an essential part of Benson's origin story, and it built her credibility mid-career. Now that it looks bad, she and the media want to minimize it. From this, I can infer that the media is looking to tell the stories that benefit Jocelyn Benson and avoid the stories that hurt her, which again, that makes you not the media, that makes you in public relations. And so rather than doing good journalism, these newspapers have turned toward doing bad PR. They're not good at it. None of their advocacy is believable. None of it's interesting. This is why people aren't reading and subscribing, but they do it anyway because they're staffed by true believers who don't think their job is to do journalism and to search for truth. They think their job is to benefit the blue team. I talk about this often. Baby boomers, I love you guys. You guys are my home base, whether it's at speeches, whether it's as donors, whether it's as readers. But I got to give you some constructive feedback here. You guys are the ones keeping the Detroit newspapers afloat. You know, my generation, their parents were baby boomers. It's not my generation, the millennials, and certainly not anyone younger than us, that's subscribing and paying money for these Detroit newspapers. That's all you guys. That's all the boomers. And so the only way to push back on the fake news agenda, the fake news industrial complex, is to unsubscribe. What the Detroit newspapers are counting on is that their boomer base is so complacent, so bound to habit that they'll never leave. For one, they don't make it easy to unsubscribe if you register on the website, and they're figuring you're either going to be too lazy to do it, or that you're going to be so stuck to the habits of your youth, I like having the physical newspaper in my hand, that you'll never leave, that you see them as so indispensable that essentially whatever they call news, you will continue to buy. And so they serve you slop. They serve you big heaping piles of slop, knowing that you'll come back, because that's been the habit of old, and habits are tough to break. So now you know what these newspapers are about. You can never pretend you haven't been told. If you continue to subscribe while knowing full well you're being fed slop, that's a you problem. That's a choice you've made. It's not my problem anymore. The Michigan Democrat Alliance is a house of cards, and that house is built on dishonesty. When Benson's ties to the Southern Poverty Law Center helped her, they talked openly about them. When they hurt her, suddenly nobody in Lansing, all these reporters of the year we have in Lansing, suddenly none of them can make the connection. That's because these people are not good news reporters. They're bad Democrat PR guys. The Detroit News, in just a few years, went from being the best newspaper in Michigan to the worst PR firm in Lansing. And they're happy with it because compared to the competition, they're still the best. And so essentially, you know, I saw a guy today, Craig Mauger, touting, we won Newspaper of the Year for the 4th straight year. Well, congrats on the tallest midget award. Maybe when you stop patting yourself on the back, you'll get to reporting the story on Jocelyn Benson, her ties to Charlottesville, her ties to the Southern Poverty Law Center, and its ties to creating the extremism it claims to be fighting against. Number 2, Dems in disarray. Guys, the days of blue no matter who are over. That's done and that's dead, if it was ever true. But what you should know is that these fractures are not new. They're just all boiling up and coming to a head right now. So if blue no matter who was what the Democrats actually believed, riddle me this. Why would Democrats feel a need to replace Joe Biden in 2024? If the idea is that Democrats would vote for a ham sandwich because that ham sandwich would do reliably Democrat things, why didn't they just stick to the plan? Why did they all panic and feel the need to dump Biden from the 2024 ballot? That's because it's not true. And apparently they don't think that their system of whatever they do to stuff ballots is so infallible that they can present obviously bad candidates and still win. So the fact that they felt the need to replace Joe Biden in the first place should tell you something. The fact that they couldn't rally around Kamala Harris in the second place should tell you something. But we also have data points just from Michigan. You remember when Democrats won the 2022 election? And they went into 2023, they were talking big trash. They said, we hold all the gavels in Lansing. We make all the decisions. Okay, but by the end of their term, by the end of 2024, the Democrats got along so badly with each other, they weren't even showing up to session anymore by the end of lame duck. The end of Democrat rule ended with a whimper, not a bang, because these are rotten people who actually don't like each other. They couldn't even get along well enough to divide up the spoils of an $80 billion budget. Character is destiny, and theirs has driven them into a ditch. We should all be worried about this example, and we should all learn from that example. But let's look at what just happened at the Democrat convention. Because what I saw at the Democrat convention in 26 was an exact repeat of the Republican convention in 22. So what you had in both cases is unlikable, unsupportable, unwinnable candidates who were selected by delegates to the party, right? And the problem with this is that jobs like Attorney General and Secretary of State, so we're talking our Chief Election Officer and our Chief Law Enforcement Officer. Forgive me, but I think those jobs are actually too important to be selected by 2,000 delegates in a musty convention hall. Call me old-fashioned, but I think it would be better if voters selected those, not politicians. And so what we just saw in 26 is a Democrat Party that has lost sense of the plot, right? So what we all feared, at least in the Attorney General race, is that they were going to choose Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald. I live in Oakland County. Oakland County is Michigan's second largest county. Karen McDonald has a national profile. She prosecuted the Oxford High School shooting. She even tried to make some legal history by prosecuting Ethan Crumbley's parents for their role in that shooting. And so you have a woman who probably would have walked into the Attorney General's job had she been placed on the ballot. But instead, they went with Washtenaw County Prosecutor Ellie Savitt. What I find funny is that people act like Karen McDonald is some moderate when actually charging the parents in a case like Oxford was extreme. That was a leftist move. But in Washtenaw County, you have this guy, Ellie Savitt, who just declines to prosecute crime across the board. And Democrats in 26 think that that guy, and not the woman who people know and respect, even if they disagree with her, was their best bet. The one piece of good news to emerge from the Democrat convention is that the era of girl boss politics appears to be over. What Democrats wanted was to come out of this convention with a full slate of women just like they had in 2018. So in 2018, you had Governor Gretchen Whitmer. You had Whitmer running for governor. You had Jocelyn Benson running for Secretary of State. You had Dana Nessel running for Attorney General. Their ideal lineup for 26 would have been Jocelyn Benson for governor, Karen McDonald for Attorney General, and Barb Byram, the clerk of Ingham County, for Secretary of State. I wrote recently about why Mike Duggan chose to leave the Democrat Party, and that reason is because it wasn't because Mike Duggan disagrees with what they do. It's because Mike Duggan read the tea leaves and realized the Democrats had become a party of girl bosses, and they weren't going to be able to adjust in a timely enough fashion to understand that Jocelyn Benson was not a winning choice in 26. And so everything you see in Mike Duggan running as an independent, he'll tell you himself his values haven't changed. No, all that changed is his electoral strategy. And Mike Duggan didn't think he could overcome the girl boss narrative, and that's the reason he left the party. And so what we have now is the Democrats rejecting sensible options, which is good for us as Republicans, but we also have them rejecting the girl bossism of the past, of just the recent past, which worked out well for them, and that's good for us as a state. Okay, so now the Democrats have been burned by the convention process. Now you have a state rep named Noah Arbit, this guy from West Bloomfield, who wants voters to choose these candidates for Secretary of State and Attorney General, and not delegates. And the cool thing is, because Democrats in 26 and Republicans in 22 have both been burned in the same way by delegates who choose unelectable candidates, we all have cellular memory of being let down by our delegates. If ever there was a moment to change things, that moment is right here and right now. But one thing I will say, windows of opportunity don't stay open forever. It is now inside the Overton window to change the way these delegate races are elected. I'll even help you guys with the slogan. I'll do you guys a public service because I don't like the system either. Just like they said voters, not politicians, should do the redistricting in Michigan, let's do this. Voters, not party insiders, should choose candidates to be our chief election officer and chief law enforcement officer. The Overton window has shifted. Full primaries for all these races is within it. Now comes time to do the real work. My question is, who's really up for that work? Third and finally, the era of positive politics is over because it never existed. In this job, not just podcasting, but also touring across Michigan, meeting people across the state and their communities, giving speeches there. You get to meet all the candidates, and I've met them all at this point. And I like Tom Leonard, our former House Speaker, who just ran for governor. I like Tom Leonard. Tom Leonard is a smart man, and he's an honorable man. And so this past week, right after turning in his signatures in the governor's race, the very next day he pulled out of it. I respect the decision, but I didn't love the way he did it. Leonard whined about negative campaigning in his statement, and he bemoaned the fact that winning would require him to become something he's not. Tom, that's not why you left the race. You didn't leave the race because it was too negative. Nobody was talking about you. Nobody had anything to say about a guy who was polling in the 5% range. Why would they, right? You didn't leave because winning would require you to give something you didn't want to give. You left because you weren't going to win under any permutation. Unless there was some kind of bomb that struck a debate and knocked out all of the 6 front runners in front of you, you were not going to win this race. And so I thought it was dishonorable and certainly not effective to whine about the very nature of politics, especially since you chose this governor's race in the first place. Tom, with your background as a former House Speaker, as a former Assistant Attorney General in Michigan, as a high-up attorney at one of the biggest law firms in Michigan, your name carries a lot of weight in the legal community. I will never understand why you did not run for Michigan Supreme Court. First, we need the help in that race. Second, Supreme Court races go a little bit different. It's not the typical mudslinging you see in campaign. These candidates do not go at each other directly. So if you wanted a chance to campaign in an honorable, non-negative fashion, Michigan Supreme Court would have been your way. And then your law firm that you work at, they would have loved to have you. So imagine never making less than 7 figures of your life because you do 2 terms on the Michigan Supreme Court, probably end up spending some amount of that time as Chief Justice, and your name rises even higher. Imagine being able to say, former Michigan House Speaker and former Michigan Supreme Court Justice. That's the kind of record that not many people could boast, and you could have had that, but you chose the wrong race, you chose the wrong tactics. Let me just tell you something. The reason positive politics doesn't work is the same reason the good news movement in the news business doesn't work. Politics and news are not about norms. They're about aberrations from the norm. And so for anyone to get up off their couch and say, I'm going to run for office, you're probably doing that not because you're so positive about how things are going. It's probably because you realize that we have a need for change. And so that's what you need to talk about. And you make the need for change by drawing a contrast between what is and your vision of what could be. And so, Leonard just turned 45 this week, and birthdays tend to bring clarity. I turned 42 in March, and I certainly got clarity out of that. What I'm clear on is that this is the parable of Tom Leonard, that the era of positive politics is over. There's no asterisk in just win, baby. You either do what's necessary or you leave quietly. What you do not do is whine about the nature of politics, which has been like this as long as there's been politics. The late, great Paul Brown, the football coach, once said that when you win, say little. When you lose, say less. Next time around, if there's a next time around, Tom Leonard should choose a race more appropriate for his demeanor. But in the meantime, Tom, you have the right to remain silent, and you should exercise it. Finally, if you guys listen to this on Spotify, feel free to give me a review. Feel free to give me that 5-star rating. That helps us reach more people like yourself. If you learn things from these Michigan political truths, send it out to a friend. My community does not hoard knowledge to itself. The whole point of me doing this podcast and going on tour, and the reason I only need 10 people to be in an audience for me to come to your town on tour, is because for each of those people I see, each of those faces in the crowd, they represent 10 other people. They represent 10 other friends, and the message will spread by word of mouth. That's the most effective marketing there is, and you all are the drivers of it. So if you would like to come, if you'd like me to come speak to your community, let me know. Email me at jamesdixonpodcast@gmail.com. Tell me about your group. Tell me where you are in Michigan. Tell me what you want from me. And much like they said in Isaiah, here I am, Lord, send me. You all have a great weekend, and we will be back next week with another edition of the James Dixon Podcast.